What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another War Thunder video. Today I'm taking out the Japanese Ki-44-II HEI. Now, in the dev server for 1.55, I was very excited about this plane in particular because of its speed. I was ripping off my combat flaps just in level flight. That's how fast this thing was on the dev server. So, just that notion alone had me just a little bit excited about this thing. So once the 1.55 patch went live, this was one of the very first planes that I tried to research and get the upgrades for. Because I was just so excited about it. You know, I mentioned in my dev server footage that I was going to do a video on this within the first week of release, and we're pretty much on target for that. Now, the Nakajima Ki-44 was built with speed in mind, and not maneuverability. This is very important to keep in mind when you're flying this thing. This is not like the Ki-43 at all. In my very first flyout with this thing in arcade, I was being outturned by bombers. Now, admittedly, I was stock, but still, being outturned by bombers was kind of humiliating, especially as a Japanese pilot. And you see here, it's not maneuverable very well. It doesn't like that turn. One of the things you'll notice at low to medium speeds, its elevator is very poor. Higher speeds is a whole other thing, but I'll get into that in a little bit. Now, my advice when upgrading this thing is to go with arcade because it's a lot easier. If you happen to opt for arcade, you're going to find yourself in a lot of games with biplanes. There are a lot of people who are just starting the game and that's all they have is biplanes. Occasionally they'll have something a little bit better, but they'll have biplanes still in their lineup, so once they lose that first plane, they'll be stuck with just those little biplanes, and those are pretty easy to kill. Even with the default ammo, which is terrible. The default ammo is absolutely horrid, but they seem to work okay with biplanes. The default ammo belt is mostly comprised of ball ammo. You also get some tracer ammo, and what I have found is that the tracers tend to blind my aim. If it were just 2 machine guns, it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but when you have 4, it just fills the air with tracers. And I actually found that this is one of the only planes where I've had a difficulty with dealing with all those tracer rounds firing. In this particular match, I'm using Omnipurpose. I'm testing Omnipurpose to see how it works, and it's kind of ineffective at times. I think some of it is a little RNG. I tend to find that machine gun ammunition is very hit and miss. It's very RNG-ish. I don't know what you guys, but let's just watch this. I'm pelting this Wildcat with rounds. Most of them are hitting him in his fuselage, and he's just soaking them up like I'm shooting nothing at him. And it's even worse if I'm using the default ammo. The default ammo is you're essentially firing marshmallows at the guy. Honestly, it is that bad. Omnipurpose is a little bit better, but as you saw there, planes can and will soak up ammunition like you're firing marshmallows at them at times. Stealth can be that way sometimes. Well, this guy's just gonna hang here for me. I'll just pepper him some more. Drop down on these other 2. But I will show some action with the stealth ammo in the next battle that'll be coming after this one in the video. Here we go. 2 examples of Omnipurpose just tearing them up, shearing off those wings very nicely. That Wildcat finally goes down. You'll notice that I'm primarily using energy tactics and booming and zooming for the most part. I don't like to turn with this. Historically, the pilots were not a big fan of the Ki-44 because of the lack of maneuverability. Of course, its predecessor, the Ki-43, was a whole different plane. It was highly maneuverable, and so I suspect a lot of people who will be trying this plane might try to fly it like a Ki-43. I don't recommend that. Not only does this thing not turn, you also have to deal with a poor elevator. With its current flight model, the Ki-44's elevator is quite poor at low speeds. I just can't quite get her on this 109 as much as I want to shoot him down. I did set him up nicely though for the other guy. He didn't unfortunately do much to him. The 109 drops down low, trying to run away. He's doing basically all he can because he's only got me on him, but there's also my teammate is near him, and there's just not a whole lot he can do. He can't outturn both of us. Eventually, we'll get him. Even if I can't get him, I got a teammate here that'll pounce on him. There we go. further wing off. And if you notice up in the upper left-hand corner, I'm out of ammo basically. I have to return to base. I can't go on. And that's one of the few weaknesses of this plane outside of its maneuverability. Even though it's got 4 50 cals, which is normally a great thing to have, especially at a low tier plane, you only get 1,000 rounds, and sometimes the lack of punch with these little machine guns, it'll force you to use more ammunition than you would have liked to have. You saw how many shots I put into that Wildcat. You could argue that I should have aimed for the wings, and that's a fair argument to make. But nonetheless, you're going to use a lot of ammunition, especially if you go up against any kind of bombers. And since you're a Japanese plane, you're going to face a lot of bombers from the American teams. In this particular match, there were a lot of bombers actually. I tended to focus on the fighters because I figured my teammates would go for the bombers, but instead they ignored a lot of them, and it was the bombers on the enemy team that ended up winning this game for them. About a minute and a half after I landed and repaired and took off, the game was over. The enemy team finished off the remaining ground targets, and they actually managed to pull off a victory by eliminating all the ground targets. I don't often run into that, even at low tiers. But, you know, hats off to those bombers. And they did their job for once. Very, very seldom do I find bombers actually manage to hold their own in a battle and work on realistic battles. It's very rare. So with that first game in hand, I'm going to fast forward right to the end credits. And you'll see with 4 kills, I managed to rack up just under 30,000 silver lions. And I also managed to finish off the plane. I finish off the bomb upgrades, and this was the plane spaded officially. All other modifications were researched in arcade, like I said earlier. And speaking of earlier, I wanted to show you a test flight that I flew out with the Ki-44. I wanted to see how strong the wings were, how good the elevator was at high speeds, and I want you to watch this thing. I go into a straight dive, whipping full tilt, over 700 kilometers an hour. I stand on the elevator, full elevator, and pick it straight up into a 90-degree climb. And the thing actually held together. It didn't rip. Over 700 kilometers per hour, a full elevator. The wings stayed on. Very, very few planes in the game can actually pull that off. Try that on a Spitfire or a P-51 Mustang. You know exactly what's going to happen. Those wings are going to pop off like they were nothing. And here we test out the energy retention. You see, we were almost down to the ocean. When I initiated my dive, I was at about 2,030 meters. I went down, well, I was about, I believe it said 29 meters off the surface of the ocean, and I zoom climbed up to 1,970 meters. That is very, very good energy retention. All of this at a plane that has a battle rating of 2.7. I'm really close to considering this thing under-tiered, believe it or not. That is phenomenal energy retention, phenomenal dive speed, over 700 kilometers an hour. Did a full stand on the elevator, and the wings stayed attached. Very impressive. Next up, we move on to the second battle of our video. We are on Guadalcanal against US and British forces. And right here, I noticed somebody who was silly enough to pitch up and try to stall climb. Now, in this battle, I'm using stealth ammo because I wanted to test how effective it would be. And as you'll see on this first engagement, I have absolutely no problem eliminating this E-36 who was stalling himself out oh so beautifully. And although I like getting those early quick kills in a match, you know, eliminating an early target, it did put me at a bit of a disadvantage because prior to that, I was climbing. I was trying to get above the enemy team because I know that no matter what their team consists of, they're going to have at least some good climbers on their team. And they do have some XP-55s, unfortunately. I believe there were 2. I believe they also had some Lightnings and some Hellcats. So if you're ever in a situation where you want to get those early kills, make sure you get your altitude afterwards, because you don't want to stay below the enemy. Unless, of course, you want to do something silly and be bait, you know, stay low, bait everyone down after you. That does actually work sometimes, but it often gets you killed. And of course, when I say it works, I mean I'm referring to you often get the victory. The team gets the victory. I mean, you tend to lose your plane. So I would recommend avoiding playing bait if at all possible. Instead, climb, get your altitude, and use that altitude to take on your enemies. In this case, we have multiple XP-55s, which were immediately disconcerting to me. I was very reluctant to engage those guys because I know how good that plane is. It's difficult enough to take down one XP-55. It's doubly difficult when you got two of them. So instead of going after the premium XP-55s, I opt to go for the Lightning. See, I put a couple of good shots into his engine. Started him smoking. I believe he's losing some oil there. I immediately try to get some altitude, try to get up above him, come back right on top of him. Always mindful of where my enemies are at all times. You have to be very aware of your situation. There you go. Kill assist, that'll work. Gotta find the next guy. Got a Hellcat down below. Got Corsairs and XP-55s everywhere. I want to be very, very mindful as to who I'm diving on, and always watching my overhead. You never want to put yourself in a situation you can't get out of. I see this Hellcat stalling out so beautifully. I line up my shots, and look at this beautiful broadside. I had no problem with those stealth rounds taking him out. If there's any doubt whatsoever as to which ammo I would recommend, it would be stealth. Omnipurpose, it works well. Stealth, at least in my experience, has been by far the best ammo that I've used. If you're just starting off with this plane, I recommend getting the ammunition belts as soon as possible. I would get them over the performance upgrades. You're not going to find any really meaningful performance upgrades until you get to the engine upgrades. You know, the engine injection or fuel injection or whatever they happen to call it on this plane. The ammunition, I find, is to be the best upgrade that you can get early on. The sooner you can get away from those marshmallow shooting default rounds, the better you'll get your upgrades so much quicker. I mean, I still had free repairs left when I had this plane spaded, and I have no doubt that you'll be able to do that as well. It's just how meaningful, how much of an impact those weapons upgrades can be. They allow you to get so many more kills. You don't have to worry about getting kill assist so much because you'll be able to rip wings clean off. You'll be able to snipe pilots. I know I keep harping on this ammo, but it really makes a big difference on this plane. You may notice I didn't immediately stand on my elevator after that dive. I didn't push my plane too hard. And that goes back to the fact that I hadn't actually tested this plane's breaking point, like I showed in that clip before. I hadn't pushed this plane to its fullest. And so I was reluctant to put too much stress on those wings. And the last thing you want to do is break your wings in the middle of a battle. And speaking of breaking things, there goes my flaps. The whole combat flaps thing, it comes down to the fact that I don't like the elevator on this plane. And so what I often do in order to increase lift is I use my combat flaps. That's a normal thing for people to do. And so the problem is this plane is so fast that those combat flaps often rip off. What I found is you get the combat flap warning at about 420 kilometers per hour, and it'll actually tear off at about 435 to 440, somewhere in that range. And so at that speed, you want to be very, very careful. Whenever you tear off your combat flaps, it's usually just one, as you can see here in this shot here. Only my right side flap has been torn off. And what that tends to do is make your plane fly kind of awkwardly. It's not level anymore because the weight distribution is off. Here we go. We've got a Lightning trying to turn fight me. Even though a Lightning is not known as a particularly good turn fighter, I've actually turn fought in the Lightning, and it's actually better than some people actually think. The Lightning I would classify as a heavy fighter and as more of a boom and zoomer, more of an energy fighter. Not completely unlike the Ki-44, which I'm flying here today. It's interesting how two planes who are built so differently in terms of their weight, they have to fly the same way. You're not going to fly either of these as turn fighters. And yet, what I've done here is I've managed to lower this guy, brought him down to the surface of the water, more or less, and I've gotten him very slow. So much so that I'm able to actually turn right on him, get on his tail, and take him out of the fight after smoking his engine initially. Don't underestimate the speed of the Ki-44. There again, I got the combat flap warning. Admittedly, it probably wouldn't have been a bad idea to let that additional combat flap tear off, because that would allow the plane to level out a little bit more. But your natural instinct as a pilot is to save the plane as best you can. You know, not to let stuff rip off. When you see that warning, your natural instinct is to raise your flaps so you don't tear something off. And yet in this one instance, I might have been better off to just let that other flap tear off. Just something to think about when you're flying. Now we fast forward a few minutes and we finally get this XP-55 within gun distance. I've been trying to bait this guy down, and I just cannot get him down. So he tries to stall me out. He pops some smoke as part of his little taunt. And I think I should catch him by surprise, because I take a nice chunk out of his plane with these 50 cals. However, I just can't quite get my aim on target, and I'm out of ammo. There's nothing I can do at this point. The XP-55 is unfortunately a much faster aircraft. It's capable of exceeding 800 kilometers an hour in a dive, and that's something I just cannot possibly catch up to. The J2M has finally decided to join the fight. He's been AFK the entire match, and unfortunately he gets hit right away by the XP-55. Takes a nice little chunk out of his plane. But to the J2M's credit, he does come back and he does give the XP-55 a challenge. He manages to force him down to a lower altitude. I've been trying to get the XP-55 down all match. I just could not get him at a lower altitude, but I have to hand it to the J2M pilot. He managed to force him down. It allows our teammates to pounce on him, to gang up on him, and eventually kill him. The J2M does unfortunately lose his plane to the XP-55. However, the XP-55 is the last plane on their team, as we earlier eliminated the CORSAIR, which I edited out because it was kind of a boring part of the match, and it just wasn't interesting enough to leave in there. So I edited that out, and a couple of our planes crashing, which, you know, it happens. I don't care what nation you're flying, there are always planes crashing. And so with the match ended, I decided just to fast forward it to the end credits. I didn't think you guys wanted to watch me return to the airfield to get additional ammunition. That's kind of a boring part. Anyway, with 3 kills, I ended up with just under 42,000 in silver lions. Another very nice little match with the Ki-44-II HEI. Again, energy fighter if you're going to use this, not a turn fighter. Get the upgrades on the ammunition ASAP. I recommend stealth. But to be honest, anything other than default is pretty good. Default is terrible. It is just horrid. Anyway, guys, if you have any questions about this plane, if you're having any troubles with it, just let me know. Drop me a line in the comments section below. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button. And of course, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Take care, guys.